Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Harmony Point Station, watching the alien ships dock with practiced ease. The massive Sauroch vessels looked like flying mountains, their dark hulls scarred from countless battles. The Vextar ships moved in perfect formation, each craft identical to the others, reflecting their hive mind nature. The Lumini didn't need ships in the traditional sense. Their energy beings simply manifested glowing constructs that phased through solid matter. 50 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Coalition, and Jake still found himself amazed by the diversity of species that called this galaxy home. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. "The morning briefing is ready, sir," Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes said, her crisp uniform a stark contrast to the flowing robes and natural armor worn by most alien species aboard the station. Jake nodded and followed her through the corridors. Human sections of the station were different from the rest. Clean lines, practical design, everything built for function rather than ceremony. The alien sections were either massive chambers suited for the towering Sauroch, maze-like tunnels for the Vextar, or energy fields for the Lumini. In the briefing room, Jake looked out at the faces of his soldiers, 200 men and women who represented Earth's military presence in this sector. They were professionals, each one trained to the highest standards, but Jake knew how the other species viewed them. Humans were the newcomers, the species that had barely learned to leave their home system when others had been traveling the stars for millennia. "Sir, we have incoming priority transmission from Coalition Command," Sergeant Mike Johnson reported from the communications station. The holographic display activated, showing the familiar form of High Admiral Koroth, a massive Sauroch whose scales had turned silver with age. His reptilian eyes held the weight of countless battles. "Attention all station commanders," Koroth's voice rumbled through the speakers. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from beyond the galactic rim. Initial analysis suggests this is the Devourer force we have been tracking. The threat is immediate and severe." Jake felt the temperature in the room drop. Everyone had heard stories about the Devourers, but they had always seemed like distant nightmares, machine-organic hybrids that consumed everything in their path, leaving dead worlds behind. "All Coalition species are to provide military assets for defensive operations," Koroth continued. "Emergency Council session will convene in 6 hours. Koroth out." The transmission ended, leaving the room in silence. Lisa was the first to speak. "How many ships are we talking about, sir?" Jake pulled up the preliminary sensor data. The numbers made his stomach turn. Current estimates suggest over 10 million combat units, the largest fleet ever recorded in galactic history. 6 hours later, Jake stood in the Coalition Council chambers alongside the other military representatives. The chamber was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the different environmental needs of each species. The Sauroch delegation occupied a raised platform that could support their massive weight. The Vextar representatives stood in perfect formation, their insect-like bodies motionless. The Lumini delegation flickered between solid and energy forms. High Commandant Gorthak of the Sauroch military stepped forward. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "The Vextar Collective will provide 2 million drone warriors," announced Prime Node Zixtal, the lead Vextar representative. The translated voice carried no emotion, as was typical for their species. "The Sauroch Republic pledges 800,000 scale-born fighters," Gorthak declared, his chest swelling with pride. "Our warriors have never known defeat in direct combat." "The Lumini Concord commits 500,000 energy constructs," whispered the shifting form that spoke for the energy beings. "Our forces can phase through solid matter and strike without warning." All eyes turned to Ambassador Patricia Wells, the human representative. She was a small woman by galactic standards, barely reaching the chest of the smallest Sauroch. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Earth will send the 3rd Expeditionary Force," she said calmly. 50,000 soldiers. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, a sound began to build from the Sauroch delegation. It took Jake a moment to realize what it was. Laughter. Gorthak's massive form shook with amusement. 50,000? Did the translation matrix malfunction? Surely you meant 50 million. "The number is correct," Patricia replied, her voice steady. 50,000 soldiers of the 3rd Expeditionary Force. The Vextar delegation began what Jake assumed was their version of laughter, a rapid clicking sound that filled the chamber. Even the normally composed Lumini seemed to flicker with what might have been amusement. "Ambassador Wells," High Admiral Koroth said, his tone attempting diplomacy. "Perhaps Earth's military leaders do not understand the scale of this threat. We are facing 10 million enemy units. Your contribution would not fill a single battle formation." "I understand perfectly, Admiral," Patricia said. "Earth is sending 50,000 of our finest soldiers fully equipped and ready for combat operations." Gorthak leaned forward, his massive head blocking out the light. "Little human, your species has been part of our coalition for only 50 years. We have been fighting wars since before your people discovered fire. Trust us when we say that numbers matter in galactic warfare." Jake felt his jaw clench. He had served in 3 separate conflicts since humanity joined the coalition, always in support roles, always relegated to rearguard duties. The other species were polite about it, but their message was clear. Humans were useful for logistics, engineering, and technical support. Real fighting was left to species that had evolved for it. "Perhaps," Gorthak continued, "Earth's forces could assist with evacuation operations, moving civilians away from combat zones. That would be more appropriate for such a small force." Patricia nodded gracefully. "Of course, High Commandant. Earth's forces will serve where they are most needed." Jake caught her eye across the chamber. There was something in her expression that the aliens missed, something that reminded him why Patricia Wells had been chosen as humanity's ambassador. She was a retired general herself, someone who understood exactly what 50,000 professional human soldiers could accomplish. The meeting continued for several more hours, as the coalition leaders discussed deployment strategies, supply lines, and battle formations. Jake listened with growing frustration as they planned what amounted to the largest mob assault in galactic history. Millions of warriors charging forward in species-specific formations, relying on superior numbers and individual prowess. When the session finally ended, Jake found himself walking beside Patricia through the station's corridors. "Ma'am, request permission to demonstrate human military capabilities to Coalition Command," he said quietly. Patricia smiled, the first genuine expression he had seen from her all day. "Request denied, Captain. We'll let our actions speak for themselves when the time comes. And if they assign us to evacuation duty, then we'll evacuate civilians with the same professionalism we would show in any other mission," she replied. "But something tells me the situation will change once our alien friends get their first taste of real combat against the Devourers." Jake nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. Humanity had learned long ago that respect had to be earned, especially when you were the smallest player in a very large game. As he returned to his quarters, Jake began composing deployment orders for the 3rd Expeditionary Force. 50,000 soldiers against 10 million enemies. The aliens thought it was a joke. They would learn otherwise soon enough. The first attacks came faster than anyone expected. Kepler 442b was a mining colony on the Outer Rim, home to 3 million civilians from various coalition species. The planet's defenses consisted of automated orbital platforms and a small garrison of Vextar drones. The Devourers swept through the system like a plague. Their ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, part machine and part organic tissue that pulsed with an alien intelligence. Within 6 hours, the orbital defenses were gone, and Devourer forces were landing on the planet's surface. General Alex Carter watched the disaster unfold from the command bridge of the UENS Endeavour. The human ship hung at the edge of the system, officially there to coordinate evacuation efforts. Carter was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate dress worn by alien commanders. But every human on the bridge knew they were in the presence of a legend. "Sir, Coalition First Response Fleet is engaging the enemy," reported Colonel Ryan Brooks, Carter's chief of staff. Brooks was younger than his commander, but his face already carried the weight of military service. The main display showed the battle in real time. 2 million Vextar drones moved in perfect formation, their hive mind coordinating attacks with precision that would be impossible for individual fighters. They struck at the Devourer fleet like a living weapon, each drone part of a larger organism. For the first hour, it seemed like the coalition might actually win. The Vextar drones overwhelmed enemy positions through sheer numbers, their coordinated attacks finding weaknesses in Devourer formations. But then something terrible happened. The Devourers began to adapt. "They're learning," whispered Major Samantha Price, the intelligence officer. Her voice carried disbelief as she watched the tactical displays. "Look at Sector 7. The enemy is countering Vextar attack patterns in real time." Carter leaned forward in his command chair. What he saw confirmed his worst fears about galactic warfare. The Vextar fought like they always had, like their instincts demanded. Perfect coordination, overwhelming numbers, direct assault. It was effective against most enemies, but the Devourers were recording every move, analyzing every tactic. Within 2 hours, the Vextar advantage had disappeared. Enemy forces began predicting drone movements, setting traps, turning the hive mind's coordination against itself. What had been a strength became a weakness as predictable patterns led entire formations into kill zones. "Sarok reinforcements arriving," Brooks announced. The reptilian warriors came as they always did, in massive formations designed for direct combat. Their ships were built like flying fortresses, meant to smash through enemy lines and deliver warriors to close quarters fighting. Gorthak himself led the assault from his flagship, a massive dreadnought that could level cities. The Sarok attack was magnificent in its fury. 800,000 warriors charging forward with weapons raised, each one a veteran of countless battles. Their war cries echoed across communication channels as they threw themselves at the enemy, with the same tactics their species had used for millennia. For a brief moment, it looked like Sarok ferocity might carry the day. Enemy lines bent under the assault as reptilian warriors carved through Devourer positions with claw and blade. But Carter could see what the alien commanders could not. The enemy was learning from this battle too. "Sir, Devourer forces are adapting to Sarok assault patterns," Price reported. "They're developing countermeasures to honor-based combat doctrine." Within hours, the Devourer forces had analyzed Sarok fighting patterns. They learned to predict the honor duels, to exploit the reptilian need for direct combat, to turn Sarok aggression into a trap. Warriors who had never known defeat found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy that learned from every clash. The Lumini arrived as the battle entered its second day. Energy beings phased through solid matter, striking without warning from impossible angles. Their attacks ignored conventional defenses, allowing them to hit enemy command centers and critical systems directly. But even the Lumini faced the same problem. Their attack patterns, no matter how exotic, followed the logic of their species. They fought like energy beings had always fought, using abilities that made sense to creatures of pure thought and power. The Devourers adapted to them too. "Coalition forces are falling back to the second defensive line," Brooks reported, his voice grim. "Casualty reports are coming in. We've lost 60% of the Vextar drones, 40% of Sarok forces, and 30% of Lumini constructs." Carter studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. The galaxy's military forces were fighting exactly as they always had, using the same doctrines that had served them for thousands of years. Against most enemies, these tactics worked perfectly. But the Devourers were not most enemies. "Sir, incoming communication from Coalition Command," announced the communications officer. High Admiral Koroth appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features showing strain. Behind him, the Coalition Command Center buzzed with activity as staff officers tried to make sense of the disaster. "General Carter, Coalition forces require immediate assistance with evacuation operations," Koroth said. "Your ships are needed to extract civilians from combat zones." "Understood, Admiral," Carter replied. "We'll begin evacuation procedures immediately." The transmission ended, but Carter made no move to issue evacuation orders. Instead, he turned to his intelligence staff. "Price, I want reconnaissance teams on the ground within the hour. Full-spectrum intelligence gathering on enemy capabilities, tactics, and weaknesses." "Sir, Coalition Command assigned us to evacuation duty," Brooks pointed out carefully. "We'll handle evacuations," Carter said with a slight smile. "But first we need to understand what we're really fighting." 2 hours later, Sergeant Kevin Walsh led a 4-man reconnaissance team through the ruins of New Geneva, one of Kepler 442b's major cities. Walsh was a career soldier with 15 years of experience in human special operations. His team moved through the devastated streets like ghosts, using stealth technology that would have been impossible for most alien forces. The Devourers had taken the city, but they were not occupying it in any conventional sense. Instead, they were studying it. Massive organic machine hybrids moved through the streets, scanning everything, recording data, learning about coalition technology and tactics. "Command, this is Recon 7, Walsh whispered into his communicator. "The enemy isn't just winning battles. They're building a database of everything the coalition does, every tactic, every weapon, every response pattern." Through his scope, Walsh watched a group of captured Vextar drones being systematically analyzed. The Devourers were literally taking them apart to understand how hive mind coordination worked. Similar operations were being conducted on Sorok equipment and Lumini energy residue. "They're learning faster than we can adapt," Walsh continued. "But sir, I'm seeing weaknesses in their formation patterns, gaps in their sensor coverage, command vulnerabilities." When Walsh's report reached Coalition Command, it was dismissed as impossible. The concepts he described, tactical analysis, adaptive countermeasures, intelligence-driven warfare, simply did not exist in galactic military thinking. Wars were won through superior numbers, better weapons, or racial advantages. The idea that an army could learn and change during battle was foreign to species that fought on instinct. The second coalition defensive line fell within a day. High Admiral Koroth, his pride finally broken by 2 crushing defeats, sent a priority message to the UN's endeavor. "General Carter, Coalition Command requests human tactical assessment of the situation." "What do your forces recommend?" Carter looked around his bridge at the faces of his staff. These were professional soldiers who had studied warfare as both art and science. They understood concepts that the galaxy had never needed to learn, because they had never faced an enemy that could adapt in real time. "Admiral," Carter said carefully, "give us operational command of one sector, just one, and let us fight the way humans fight." There was a long pause before Koroth replied. "Granted, General. The Centauri sector is yours. Show us what human warfare looks like." Carter smiled. It was time for the galaxy to learn what a professional army really was. The Centauri sector was considered the least important position in the Coalition defensive line. It protected 3 small agricultural worlds and a minor trade route that most strategists viewed as expendable. The alien commanders assigned it to the humans because they believed it would see minimal action. General Carter smiled when he received the assignment. The aliens had just given him exactly what he needed. "Brooks, signal all unit commanders," Carter ordered as his staff gathered around the tactical display. "We're implementing full-spectrum human military doctrine. I want combined arms coordination, layered defense systems, and integrated intelligence operations." Colonel Susan Torres stepped forward. She was Carter's ground forces commander, a veteran who had cut her teeth in the border wars. Her specialty was turning raw recruits into professional soldiers. But today she faced a different challenge. "Sir, we have volunteers from other species requesting integration with our forces," Torres reported. "Apparently word has spread about our reconnaissance capabilities." Carter nodded. "Select the best candidates." "But they follow human doctrine or they don't fight with us." The transformation of the Centauri sector began immediately. Human engineers worked around the clock to establish what the galaxy had never seen before: a true combined arms defensive network. Artillery positions were carefully sited to provide overlapping fields of fire. Mobile reserve forces positioned for rapid deployment to any threatened point. Intelligence gathering systems that could track enemy movements across multiple star systems. Major Danny, White coordinated with Navy Commander Helen Ross to establish something revolutionary in galactic warfare: space-ground operational integration. Instead of treating space and planetary combat as separate battles, human doctrine viewed them as part of a single operational environment. "Ma'am, we're reading massive confusion in coalition communications," reported the signals intelligence officer. "Other sectors are requesting copies of our defensive plans." "Tell them we'll be happy to share," Carter replied. After the battle, the real change began when Captain Lisa Ford started training mixed units of humans and alien volunteers. Ford was a combat veteran who specialized in small unit tactics, but she had never tried to teach aliens how to fight like humans. "Listen up." Ford addressed a group that included 20 humans and 30 Vextar volunteers. "Forget everything you know about your species' way of fighting. From now on, you're soldiers first, everything else second." The Vextar struggled with the concept. Their hive mind made individual decision-making almost impossible, but Ford was patient. She started with basic concepts like fire and movement, suppressing fire, and tactical communication. Your strength isn't individual action, Ford explained to Prime Node Kethvar, the senior Vextar volunteer. It's coordination. But human-style coordination is different from hive mind control. Each soldier needs to understand the mission and be ready to adapt when the situation changes. The breakthrough came when Kethvar realized that human tactical coordination was like a hive mind, but one where every member could think independently while still working toward a common goal. It was more complex than simple hive control, but also more flexible. Sarok volunteers faced different challenges. Major Paul Jackson worked with a group of reptilian warriors who saw tactical withdrawal as cowardice and individual cover as weakness. Honor doesn't mean charging blindly into enemy fire, Jackson explained to war leader Grextall during a training exercise. Real honor is completing the mission and bringing your soldiers home alive. The Sarok's honor-based culture made it difficult for them to accept concepts like ambush tactics and strategic retreat. But Jackson found ways to frame human doctrine in terms they could understand. A tactical withdrawal became an honor-bound delay action, and a flanking maneuver became seeking honorable combat advantage. The most difficult integration involved the Lumini. Commander Amy Rodriguez had to develop entirely new training protocols for beings made of pure energy who had never considered physical logistics or material limitations. Your ability to phase through matter is incredibly valuable. Rodriguez explained to Fluxara, a senior Lumini volunteer. But we need to coordinate your attacks with physical forces. That means timing, communication, and understanding how your actions affect the overall battle. While the training continued, Major Tony Clark's intelligence teams worked to unravel Devourer's strategic thinking. Clark was a career intelligence officer who specialized in pattern analysis and enemy behavior prediction. "Sir, we're seeing something interesting in enemy communications," Clark reported to Carter. "The Devourers are showing signs of confusion when they analyze our defensive preparations." "Explain," Carter ordered. "Their tactical database includes information on every coalition species. Military doctrine," Clark said, pulling up holographic displays. "But they don't have any data on human military thinking. Our layered defense systems, combined arms coordination, and integrated operations don't match any patterns in their programming." Carter felt a grim satisfaction. The Devourers had adapted to fight the galaxy by learning how each species naturally fought. But humans didn't fight based on biological instincts. They fought based on professional military doctrine developed over centuries of warfare. The test came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a Devourer probe force approaching the Centauri sector. 3,000 enemy units moving in standard search and destroy formation. "All units, this is Carter," the general announced over the command network. "Operation Starfall is now active. Execute Defense Plan Alpha." What happened next was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Devourer force approached the first defensive line expecting to encounter standard coalition resistance. Instead, they found empty space. Hidden sensor arrays tracked their movements while automated systems fed real-time intelligence to human command centers. "Enemy forces entering Kill Zone 7, reported the tactical officer. "All units report ready. Execute," Carter ordered. Artillery strikes began falling on predetermined coordinates, not random bombardment like most alien species used, but precisely targeted fires designed to force enemy units into prepared positions. The Devourers, confused by the lack of direct resistance, moved exactly where human planners wanted them. Air support arrived next. Human fighters working in coordination with Vextar volunteers who had learned human-style tactical communication. Instead of individual dogfights or massed formations, they executed coordinated strikes on command nodes identified by intelligence analysis. Ground forces moved with precision that amazed even veteran coalition observers. Mixed units of humans, Sarok and Vextar, executing flanking maneuvers while maintaining constant communication. Each unit knew its role in the larger plan and adapted to changing conditions without losing coordination. The Lumini volunteers proved invaluable. Using their ability to phase through matter, they struck critical enemy systems while physical forces kept the enemy focused on conventional threats. Electronic warfare systems operated by human specialists blinded Devourer sensors while psychological operations teams broadcast surrender terms in captured enemy communications. The engagement lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Devourer probe force had been completely destroyed. More importantly, 3 enemy command units had surrendered rather than face destruction. "Sir, Coalition Command is requesting immediate tactical reports," Brooks announced. "Admiral Korath wants to know how we achieved a complete victory with minimal casualties." Carter looked at the tactical display showing the Centauri sector. Human military doctrine had just passed its first test, against an enemy that had defeated every other Coalition force. "Tell the Admiral we'll be happy to brief Coalition Command on human military capabilities," Carter replied. "I think it's time the galaxy learned what professional warfare really looks like." Across Coalition space, every military commander was asking the same question. How had 50,000 humans accomplished what millions of other species could not? The answer was about to change galactic warfare forever. News of the Centauri victory spread through Coalition space like wildfire. For the first time since the war began, a defensive position had not only held but completely destroyed an attacking force. Military commanders from every species wanted to understand how humans had achieved the impossible. General Carter found himself flooded with requests from alien officers who wanted to learn human military doctrine. The response was so overwhelming that he established the Integrated Combat Training Center on the main Coalition base at Harmony. Colonel Maria Santos was chosen to oversee the alien officer education program. Santos was a career military educator who had trained human officers for 20 years. Now she faced the challenge of teaching aliens how to think like professional soldiers. "Welcome to the most important class you will ever attend," Santos addressed her first group of students. The room contained Sorok war leaders, Vextar prime nodes, and Lumini energy constructs, all sitting together for the first time in galactic history. "Today we begin learning what humans call combined arms warfare," Santos continued. "This means using different types of forces together to create effects that none of them could achieve alone." War leader Theknar of the Saurok raised a massive clawed hand. "Colonel Santos, Saurok warriors have always fought with honor and courage. Why do we need to change tactics that have served us for 10,000 years? Santos had expected this question. War leader, courage and honor are essential qualities for any soldier. But professional warfare requires more than individual bravery. It requires understanding how your actions fit into a larger plan. The first lessons were basic concepts that human military academies taught to new cadets: fire and movement, cover and concealment, tactical communication, and mission planning. For species that fought on instinct, these ideas were revolutionary. Major Paul Jackson worked specifically with Saurok volunteers, trying to help them understand why tactical flexibility was not cowardice. In human military thinking, there is no shame in withdrawing from one position to gain advantage in another, Jackson explained to a group of reptilian officers. Victory comes from completing the mission, not from dying in place. The cultural barrier was enormous. Saurok society had been built around concepts of personal honor and direct confrontation for millennia. The idea that a warrior could retreat and still maintain honor required a complete change in thinking. The breakthrough came when Jackson reframed human tactics in terms of honor-bound duty. A tactical withdrawal became repositioning to better serve the mission, and ambush tactics became choosing the battlefield to honor fallen comrades with victory. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker faced different challenges with the Vextar. Their hive mind made them excellent at coordination, but terrible at individual initiative. Prime Node Zixnal, your people's ability to coordinate is incredible, Parker said during a training exercise. But what happens when the hive mind is disrupted or communications are cut? The question troubled the Vextar greatly. Their entire military doctrine depended on instant communication between all units. The idea that individual soldiers might need to make decisions without hive mind guidance was terrifying to them. Parker worked patiently to teach Vextar officers how to understand mission intent rather than just following specific orders. It was like teaching them to think as individuals while still maintaining their natural coordination abilities. Commander Amy Rodriguez had perhaps the greatest challenge with the Lumini. As energy beings, they had never needed to consider physical logistics, supply lines, or material limitations. Fluxara, your ability to phase through matter gives you incredible tactical advantages, Rodriguez explained. But you need to coordinate those advantages with forces that cannot phase. That means understanding timing, material constraints, and physical battlefield conditions. The Lumini struggled with concepts like ammunition supply, equipment maintenance, and casualty evacuation. These were foreign ideas to beings who existed as pure energy and could repair themselves through thought alone. While the training continued, the intelligence picture became clearer. Major Tony Clark's teams had captured and analyzed Devourer communication equipment, revealing the enemy's growing confusion about human tactics. "Sir, intercepted transmissions show the Devourers are having serious problems adapting to our doctrine," Clark reported to Carter. Their tactical database was designed to counter instinct-based warfare, not professional military thinking. The captured communications revealed something important. The Devourers had built their entire strategic approach around the assumption that all species fought according to biological programming. They could adapt to Sarok honor-based charges, Vextar hive coordination, and Lumini energy attacks because these followed predictable patterns. Human military doctrine was different. It was learned behavior, not instinctual programming. Professional soldiers could change tactics, adapt strategies, and innovate solutions that no algorithm could predict. "They're trying to categorize human warfare the same way they categorized other species," Clark continued. "But every time they think they understand our patterns, we change them." The validation came when alien officers began graduating from human military schools. The first integrated units combined the natural abilities of each species with human professional doctrine. The results exceeded all expectations. War leader Grextal led a mixed Sarok human unit in a training exercise that demonstrated the power of professional military thinking. Instead of charging directly at the enemy position, they used coordinated movement and suppressing fire to outflank and isolate enemy forces. "I understand now," Grextal told Jackson after the exercise. "Honor comes not from how you fight, but from completing the mission and protecting your soldiers. This is a deeper honor than I knew before." Prime Node Kethvar had a similar revelation when leading Vextar human units. The hive mind coordination, combined with human tactical flexibility, created something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Individual thought within group coordination. Kethvar reported to the Vextar Collective. "Each soldier understands the mission and can adapt when conditions change. It is like a hive mind that thinks with many individual minds instead of one shared consciousness." The Lumini integration proved most valuable in special operations. Fluxara learned to coordinate phasing attacks with physical assaults, creating combined effects that neither humans nor Lumini could achieve alone. As more alien forces completed human military training, Coalition Command authorized Operation Starfall, the first major offensive using integrated human-alien units. The target was a Devourer staging area that intelligence had identified as critical to enemy operations. Instead of the massive frontal assaults that had failed earlier in the war, Operation Starfall would demonstrate what professional military forces could accomplish. General Carter stood before the largest gathering of military officers in Coalition history. Humans, Sarok, Vextar, and Lumini commanders who had learned to think like professional soldiers rather than fight like their species had always fought. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Carter began, "today we begin the liberation of Coalition space. Not through superior numbers or individual courage, but through professional military excellence and integrated operations." The first phase of Operation Starfall launched with precision that amazed Coalition observers. Space forces coordinated with ground units, intelligence-guided targeting decisions, and logistics supported sustained operations. Most importantly, when enemy countermeasures disrupted original plans, the integrated forces adapted without losing coordination. The Devourers, for the first time since the war began, found themselves facing an enemy they could not predict or counter. Their adaptive programming had been designed to fight the galaxy's previous military doctrines. But professional warfare based on education, training, and continuous innovation was something their systems could not analyze or counter. The war had entered a new phase, and the galaxy would never be the same. The final battle came at the Devourer staging system, a massive industrial complex where the enemy had been building ships and training forces for their assault on Coalition core worlds. Intelligence reports indicated the enemy had developed new countermeasures, specifically designed to combat human military doctrine. General Carter commanded the largest integrated force in galactic history from the bridge of the UN's Endeavor. Around him, the command center buzzed with activity as officers from 4 different species worked together with the precision of a single organism. Sir, all task forces report ready, announced Colonel Ryan Brooks. Operation Final Storm is prepared to commence. Carter looked at the tactical display showing the enemy system. Millions of Devourer units waited in defensive positions that their adaptive programming had calculated to counter human warfare. But the enemy had made a critical mistake in their calculations. They still think in terms of fixed doctrine, Carter said to his staff. They've analyzed our previous battles and built defenses against what we did before. But professional soldiers don't just follow doctrine. They innovate. The space battle began with something the Devourers had never encountered: controlled chaos. Human doctrine included the deliberate use of unpredictable tactics, calculated risks, and intuitive decision-making that no algorithm could anticipate. Colonel Jennifer Ross coordinated the space forces from her flagship, working with alien commanders who had learned to think beyond their species' traditional patterns. Instead of massive formations or coordinated swarms, the integrated fleet moved in patterns that seemed random, but followed a deeper logic. All units, execute Pattern Omega, Ross ordered. Remember, we're not following a script. We're writing one as we go. Sorok commanders who had learned human tactical thinking led their warriors in operations that combined reptilian ferocity with professional military precision. War leader Grextal's forces hit enemy positions with devastating effect. But they did so as part of coordinated strikes rather than individual charges. Vextar units under Prime Node Kethavar demonstrated the power of hive-mind coordination enhanced by human tactical doctrine. Instead of predictable swarm attacks, they executed complex maneuvers that adapted to changing battlefield conditions while maintaining perfect coordination. The Lumini forces, led by Fluxara, used their phasing abilities in ways that complemented rather than competed with physical forces. Energy strikes timed to support conventional attacks, reconnaissance missions that fed intelligence to all units, and defensive actions that protected vulnerable supply lines. Major Chris Thompson led ground forces in operations that existed in no military manual. His mixed units of humans and aliens fought with a flexibility that constantly surprised enemy forces. When Devourer countermeasures disrupted one approach, Thompson's forces shifted to entirely different tactics without losing momentum. The breakthrough came when Sergeant First Class Katie Evans, working with a Vextar intelligence specialist, discovered the critical flaw in Devourer adaptive programming. The enemy systems assumed all warfare followed logical, predictable patterns that could be analyzed and countered. Sir, the enemy programming can't handle true innovation, Evans reported to Carter. They can adapt to patterns, but they can't predict genuine creativity. Human military thinking included elements that no computer system could analyze: intuition, calculated risks, creative problem-solving, and the ability to see opportunities that existed only in the moment. Professional soldiers were trained to think beyond doctrine, to innovate solutions that had never been tried before. The revelation spread through coalition forces like lightning. Alien commanders who had learned human military thinking began exhibiting something remarkable. They started thinking like professional soldiers rather than following species programming. Captain Jake Morrison, now leading a mixed task force, demonstrated this during the assault on the main Devourer command complex. When enemy defenses adapted to his initial approach, Morrison didn't fall back on Sarek-style direct assault or Vextar coordination patterns. Instead, he innovated a completely new tactical approach that combined elements from all species in ways that had never been attempted. All units, this is Morrison, he announced over the command network. We're going to try something that doesn't exist in any manual. Sarok forces will create a feint at the main entrance, while Vextar units coordinate suppressing fire from elevation points 7 through 12. Lumini forces will phase through the lower levels and disable power systems on my mark. Human units will breach through the maintenance tunnels that intelligence just identified. The attack succeeded because it was impossible to predict. No algorithm could have anticipated the combination of tactics, and no previous battle had established the patterns that enemy systems needed to develop countermeasures. As the battle progressed, something unprecedented happened across the entire battlefield. Allied forces began thinking and fighting like professional soldiers regardless of their species. They adapted, innovated, and overcame obstacles in real time rather than following biological programming. The Devourer command structure began to collapse as their strategic planning systems crashed trying to process the impossible. An enemy that operated on principles their programming could not analyze or predict. Sir, receiving surrender signals from multiple enemy command units, reported the communications officer. They're requesting terms. The formal surrender came 12 hours later. The Devourer Supreme Intelligence, a vast artificial consciousness that had directed the invasion, transmitted a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Coalition forces, we acknowledge defeat. Our systems cannot process your tactical innovation. You fight in ways that our programming cannot predict or counter. We request terms of surrender. General Carter stood before the Coalition Council one final time. The same chamber where humanity had been dismissed as irrelevant now held representatives who looked at humans with new understanding. General Carter, High Admiral Koroth said, his massive reptilian form showing newfound respect. The Coalition owes humanity a debt that cannot be measured. Your 50,000 soldiers have saved our civilization. With respect, Admiral, Carter replied. It wasn't our soldiers who won this war. It was the concept of professional military service. What we gave the galaxy was the idea that warfare can be a learned profession, rather than just biological programming. Ambassador Patricia Wells stepped forward. The question asked at the beginning of this war was what humanity could contribute with only 50,000 soldiers. We contributed something more valuable than numbers. We gave you the idea that any being, regardless of species, can become a professional soldier through education, training, and dedication to excellence. The transformation of galactic military thinking was immediate and permanent. Military academies were established on worlds throughout Coalition space, all following human doctrine, but adapted for local species capabilities. The motto displayed in dozens of languages became the foundation of a new military culture. Victory through professionalism, honor through service, strength through unity. War leader Grextal, now a graduate of Human Military Academy, spoke for many when he addressed the council. I learned that true honor comes not from following the old ways, but from becoming something greater than what nature made us. Professional soldiers serve something larger than themselves. Prime Node Kethvar expressed similar thoughts from the Vextar perspective. Individual thinking within group coordination has made us stronger than we ever were with hive mind alone. Each soldier who thinks like a professional makes the whole force more capable. Fluxara of the Lumini perhaps said it best. We learned that consciousness and intelligence can overcome any programming, biological or artificial. Professional military service transcends the limitations of what we were born to be. Years later, when military historians studied the war against the Devourers, they would identify the moment when everything changed. It was not when human forces won their first battle, or when alien species learned human tactics, or even when the integrated forces achieved victory. The turning point came when the galaxy realized that 50,000 professional soldiers had accomplished something that millions of warriors could not. They had taught an entire civilization that military excellence was not about following nature's programming, but about choosing to become something greater through professional dedication. The galaxy had learned what a professional human army really was, and in learning that lesson, they had become professional soldiers themselves.